Hi there, welcome to Explain This, a podcast where we try to explain complex things in simpler ways for people of all ages. I'm your host Jin Kim, and today we're going to talk about aliens, or better yet, the apparent absence of aliens. Let's get started. A question that we have been asking a lot in the past 100 years is, do aliens exist? This is probably thanks to a sudden increase in our knowledge and understanding of how vast our universe is, along with aliens being such a popular topic in media. But possibly a more interesting thought is, what if aliens don't exist? What if we're alone in this ridiculously large universe and we're the first beings since the dawn of time to develop intelligence? I've always loved the concept that we're the universe trying to study itself. I mean, we're made of star stuff, and we're trying to understand star stuff. If you've ever had any interest in the question of whether aliens exist or not, you would have probably come across something called the Fermi Paradox. Turns out, us common people aren't the only people that have been asking the question. Some of the greatest minds on the planet have pondered the same thought. So what is the Fermi Paradox, and what can it tell us about the possibility of alien civilizations elsewhere in the universe? As always, let's explain the Fermi Paradox to you as if you're a child. Imagine waking up in a random house. Inside the house, everything looks normal. Your parents are downstairs making breakfast, your siblings are playing in the living room, the dog is digging a hole in the backyard, and the cat's having a sleep on the couch. You hear birds twittering in the trees, you see a rabbit hide in the bush, and you see ants along the wall of the house. The house seems to be full of life. But you also notice something odd. When you look out the window, you can't see anyone outside on the streets. There's no people walking their dogs, no cars are driving past, no airplanes in the sky, nothing. You don't even hear anything from outside of the fence around the house. You get a bit spooked and you're a little curious, so you start reaching out to see if anyone else might be out there. You send text messages to random phone numbers, maybe make some phone calls, and even shout out of the window saying, "Hello!" But nothing, no answers. So you start searching a bit harder. You use a drone to look around the neighborhood. Maybe your house is just in the middle of nowhere? But the photos from your drone make it obvious that there are lots of other houses. And maybe not as nice as your house, but certainly nice enough for families to live there. And the neighborhood can't be that bad if your parents decided to live here. And there's delicious food on the table, and there's all those animals in the backyard. So why aren't there any other people living in all the similar houses around you? Where the flip is everyone? This is what's called the Fermi Paradox, except instead of houses and people, we're talking about stars and aliens. If you look up into the night sky, you're looking at about 2,500 stars. That sounds like a lot, right? Well, turns out that's only a teeny tiny fraction of the stars in space. Turns out there are billions and billions of stars out there, each with billions of planets per star. Some of the planets are even like Earth, and they look like life could live there. But scientists haven't found any signs of life in the universe so far, other than us. They're looking hard too, with robot probes and massive antennae that can listen for even super faint messages in space, but they got nothing. Why though? If there are so many stars and planets out there, surely life must have happened in lots of other places. Is it because we're the only living things in the universe? Is it because all the other living things are dead already? Or are they all hiding from us because there's a big scary bully alien going around beating up all the other aliens? Whatever it is, it just doesn't seem right. It doesn't add up. And that's the Fermi Paradox. Welcome back. If there's one thing we've established on this podcast so far, it's that human beings are bad at conceptualizing ridiculously large numbers. Whether it be trillion% inflation or quadrillion neurons, our brains, wonderful as they are, just can't picture really big amounts. So we're going to try hard to give you an idea of just how redonkulously big the universe is, but don't feel bad if you can't picture it. We live on what seems like a massive chunk of rock called Earth, which orbits a ball of gas over 100 times wider than Earth, called the Sun. The Sun is an example of a star, and all the things that orbit around it, like the planets and asteroids and dust, are what we call the solar system. Our solar system is one of many such systems in a galaxy called the Milky Way. How many exactly? About 400 billion stars in the Milky Way alone. And if you think that's big, well, turns out the universe has about 100 billion galaxies, each with 100 to 1,000 billion stars in it. Which means there are about 1 septillion stars in the universe. That's 1 followed by 24 freaking zeros after it. To give you a comparison, it's estimated that there are around 20 septillion drops of water in all the oceans on Earth. It's a truly astounding number. It makes it feel like we're absolutely puny in the face of the universe. Our star is literally 1 drop in the ocean. So if that's the case, surely we're not the only planet in this big universe where intelligent life could have developed, right? It seems so statistically improbable for aliens not to exist. I mean, let's just take the Milky Way for example. Our Milky Way has 400 billion stars, 20 billion of which are about the same size as the Sun. Scientists estimate about 20% of those stars have a planet orbiting around them in what's called the habitable zone, a perfect Goldilocks band around the star where the temperature is not too cold and not too hot for carbon-based life to thrive in. Now, obviously temperature isn't the only variable for life to exist, so let's say only 0.1% of all of those planets could sustain life. That's still 1 million planets though. There's just so many planets and stars out there that chances are there are several worlds that are almost identical to Earth, or at least have the right conditions for life to evolve in. So if you were a betting person, based on pure numbers and statistics, it would be pretty fair to bet that aliens exist. Because why wouldn't they when there are so many possible places for them to have sprouted from? This is what scientists have been wondering even from 70 years ago. The most famous conversation about this topic happened in 1950 when Italian physicist Enrico Fermi was chatting with his scientist mates, and they started talking about UFOs, like you do at a work lunch. To give you some context, we haven't actually known how big the universe is until quite recently. It was only 1920 when we properly realized that other galaxies exist, let alone hundreds of billions of them. The Big Bang Theory was coined in the 1940s, and we didn't even know for sure that other stars had planets until we discovered exoplanets in 1992. So in 1950, it had only been 20 or 30 years since scientists realized how massive the universe might be, which is why the topic of aliens became more interesting. Enrico Fermi was amongst these people. He was a brilliant physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project that created the nuclear bomb. And he was actually the first person to create a nuclear reactor, known as the Chicago Pile. And his mates in the cafeteria? Also brilliant scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project. So this isn't some casual water cooler conversation about what you did on the weekends. It was a discussion between some truly great thinkers. Anyway, Fermi and his friends started talking about UFOs and started pondering the question of, from what we know, there are so many stars in the universe, and there are probably other planets like Earth. We know from physics that basic laws are true everywhere. Gravity works the same way as it does on Earth, as it does on the moon. Just the proportions are different. If you took a magnet to a different galaxy, it would still stick to iron in the same way as it does back home. Physics is universal. Which means that if you had another planet with similar conditions to Earth, you'd expect for life to be able to develop, just like it did with us. Plus, in the grand scheme of things, Earth is quite a young planet. It's only been around for 4.54 billion years, which is actually only about a third of the universe's age. This means that there is a chance that life on other planets might have had a massive head start compared to us. Imagine that. If another civilization arose 4 billion years before Earth was even formed, if humanity went from farming to steam engines to flying machines to landing on the moon in 10,000 years of time, what could 4 billion extra years let a civilization do? When it comes to discussing how advanced a civilization is, a scale called the Kardashev scale is often used. The scale groups civilization into 3 types, 1, 2, and 3. Simple. A type 1 civilization is one who can harness all the energy of a planet, as in they have total control over all the resources. Type 2 is when the civilization can access and harness the energy of a whole star, like solar panels, except you're surrounding the entire sun with solar panels to extract all the energy. We call this kind of machine a Dyson sphere. Type 3 civilizations go one step further and can harness the energy of an entire galaxy. We would expect the Type 3 civilization to have mastered interstellar travel and galactic colonization, because of their technological advancements and access to such sheer amounts of energy. Before we get too excited, humanity sits somewhere between zero point 0.7 to zero point 0.8 on the Kardashev scale, and that's while causing a lot of damage to our planet to access said resources. So we're not quite that far advanced yet. Anyway, we'd expect a civilization that has had billions of years to develop to have reached Type 3, meaning they should have already started colonizing the galaxy. If even one of the million planets in the Milky Way raised a Type 3 civilization, and they started sending magical self-replicating robot probes that can automatically colonize a star system, then send out more probes to conquer neighboring star systems, it would actually only take about 3.75 million years to take over the entire Milky Way. This means that given the long timescale of the universe, as in billions of years, Earth and our solar system should have been visited or contacted by an alien civilization already if they exist somewhere in the Milky Way. But by all accounts, there are no confirmed sightings or messages from aliens, other than a lot of hoaxes. This just doesn't add up. How could there be trillions and trillions of worlds out there, and none of them are populated with advanced civilizations that can visit or talk to us? It just doesn't make sense. And this is what the Fermi Paradox is. The Fermi Paradox at its core is quite basic. It's the astronomical equivalent of a chronically single friend saying, there's so many eligible young men and women out there, surely someone's right for me, why haven't I found the one yet? The more interesting implication of the Fermi Paradox is not the question, but the possible answers. Why haven't we seen any evidence of aliens? We've been looking hard too. Since the 1960s, SETI, or Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, has been actively screening the skies with massive satellite dish arrays for any signals or messages that aliens might be sending to us. But still, nothing. Which means the Fermi Paradox still stands. So, let's take a short break, and when we're back, we'll explore some of the possible explanations for the question, where the heck is everybody? And we're back. So the Fermi Paradox has been around for 70 odd years, and it's been a very popular question among scientists and thinkers. We still don't have an exact solution for the paradox, but there have been dozens and dozens of possible explanations for why the paradox exists. The explanations fall broadly into two categories, both of which we'll explore in this episode. The first category is that we haven't found or heard from any aliens because they don't exist. The second category is that aliens do exist, but we just haven't found them yet, or they're hiding from us. So let's explore the first category first. What if aliens don't actually exist? What could this mean? If you've heard of the Fermi Paradox, you may have also heard of another concept that gets talked about alongside it, the Great Filter. The Great Filter is unfortunately not the name of the best pour-over coffee shop in the world, although dibs on that name for my inevitable retirement plan. The Great Filter is a concept that perhaps there are certain events or conditions or barriers that are super hard for life to overcome, to allow it to reach a state of star-faring civilizations. As in, it could be that something stops civilizations from advancing to the point where it can travel to or communicate with other stars, which is why there aren't any around. To highlight the different kind of great filters, let's talk about the three broad possibilities if such a great filter exists. We're rare, we're first, or we're we're screwed. The first possibility is that it could be that we're rare and special. We've already passed the great filter, and we've survived it. Hooray! A great example of such a filter would be abiogenesis, as in, life never formed in the first place. It's pretty hard to have intelligent, sapient creatures if cells didn't even develop in the first place. Similarly, it could be that the jump from a simple prokaryote, like a bacteria, to a complex eukaryote, like fish, is really difficult. Which would mean space could be full of bacterial life, but nothing more complicated than that. This theory is less plausible because even on Earth, it's happened at least 46 times separately. But it's entirely possible that self-replicating life being born from inorganic matter is such a rare phenomenon that Earth is a special, one and only life-birthing planet. If that's the case, then we should feel really grateful, and bear in mind that if we screw this up, we kind of screw up the chance of any intelligent life remaining in the universe. So let's not try to mess it up by blowing ourselves up, or the planet. The second possibility is that we're first, as in, there aren't any great filters, and we're just ahead of all the other civilizations. This seems unlikely given just how long the universe has been around for. But maybe the first 2/3 of the universe's life was inhospitable to actual life. For example, There might have been too many gamma ray bursts wiping out all seedlings of life, and it's only now that life had the chance to evolve enough into, well, us. The last possibility is the scariest. The Great Filter is ahead of us, and we're doomed. This is based on the thought that if the Great Filter isn't early on like abiogenesis or rare, as in every civilization has to deal with it at some point, then it must be ahead of us. This theory suggests that life regularly evolves to our level, inventing things like economies and locomotion and TikTok. But something kills them before they can make it to anything more than a Type 1 civilization. For example, it could be that it's in the nature of all intelligent life to eventually destroy itself, whether it be creating weapons that can cause its own extinction, such as nuclear weapons, or harvesting the planet's resources in an unsustainable manner, causing irreversible climate change. Sound familiar? It's also possible that it's easy for something to go wrong and interstellar travel becomes impossible. Like, there's something called Kessler syndrome, which is a hypothetical but very real risk that if an orbiting satellite is hit by another satellite or debris, the new debris from the crash could set off a chain reaction, until all the satellites around the Earth get smashed to smithereens, and the cloud of rapidly orbiting space debris would rip whatever rocket trying to leave Earth to shreds. As in, we would never be able to leave Earth because of the sphere of high-speed shrapnel obliterating anything trying to pass the barrier. In that sense, the Great Filter could be a literal physical barrier. So, ain't that cheery? All of these exciting science fiction books and movies promising us days of traversing the galaxy, meeting benevolent advanced aliens who can lift us to a new level of technology, exploring and settling new realms, or meeting a triple-breasted woman on Mars. But in reality, we might not get to do any of that because the universe has a best before date for civilizations. And it's somewhat sad that there could have been millions of amazing diverse alien civilizations that have existed, but they've all died out long before we were even little happy bacteria floating in the ocean. Oh, and the best theory? It's possible that the Great Filter isn't some phenomenon like climate change or the birth of life, but another civilization. As in, maybe aliens exist, but they're not coming to help us. Alright, so let's talk about the possible explanations that involve aliens existing on other planets. What are some reasons we might not have found them yet, or met them yet? As we've talked about, there's not that much special about Earth. There are millions of planets throughout the universe that have the same conditions as Earth, whether it be distance from the star, chemical composition, or size of the planet, etc. This is called the mediocrity principle. Statistically speaking, life should exist elsewhere because there's so many chances for it. Plus, they've probably been around longer than we have, which means there should be at least some civilizations that are advanced enough to have visited Earth, or at the very least, tried to look for us. So maybe they do exist and we just don't know about them. One possibility is that Earth has been visited by aliens, but not while we've been around. Remember that humanity is very, very young. Like, we're newborns in the history of the Earth. If Earth's timeline was compressed into 1 year, human civilizations would last less than a minute of that year. So it's pretty egotistical for us to assume that aliens would have only visited in that final minute. What if they visited, say, 65 million years ago and they only saw dinosaurs roaming the Earth? They might have said, nothing special, they're still only at the thundering lizard stage of evolution, they don't even have cell phones yet, and just left. It's also possible that aliens have colonized the Milky Way, but we happen to be in the wop-wops of the universe, and no one wants to live in such a backwater neighborhood, so they haven't bothered visiting us. Like how we're still discovering remote villages and forests and islands that are still in the Stone Age because they're so isolated. On a similar note, perhaps we're too violent and basic to be considered worth interacting with, because we'd probably just try to shoot missiles at any aliens visiting us. To quote Bill Watterson, who wrote the Calvin and Hobbes comics, sometimes I think the surest sign that intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe is that none of it has tried to contact us. There's also the very likely possibility that these alien civilizations are so much more advanced than us that we can't even interact with them. For example, what if our technologies or communication forms are different? If you took a modem from now back to the 1800s and tried to stream Netflix, all the telegraphers would be like, what the hell is this noise? It makes no sense on Morse code chart. Because the technology would be incompatible. It's possible that because they're so advanced, they're using compression algorithms for the data that are so good that we think it's just random noise and background static. Similarly, aliens might not use the same kind of radar communication technology as us, so we might be broadcasting signals that they're not even listening for. while they're sending colors at us or something like that. If you watch the movie Arrival, which you totally should, it's amazing, the aliens communicate with circular ink blots instead of sound. So it could be that aliens are trying to talk to us, but it's like they're speaking Greek to us, metaphorically speaking. Then again, what if they're not trying to talk to us? What if they think we're adorable with our primitive technology and are just watching us from afar, like we're a zoo enclosure? What if they're so advanced that we're puny bugs to them, not even worth looking for? Like, if a construction company was building a motorway through a forest, would they ask permission from an anthill? Would the ants understand that a motorway is being constructed in their backyard, let alone know what a motorway is? In fact, what if these civilizations are so advanced that colonization isn't even something they do? Maybe the thought of conquering and expanding to other worlds is just human greed. Like, if you had the ability to harness the energy of an entire star, you could build super duper strong megacomputers, known as a Matryoshka brain. Such an incredibly powerful computer could generate a paradise simulation land, like the Matrix, where the inhabitants of the civilization could upload their consciousness to it, and spend the rest of their eternal virtual lives exploring fantastical worlds, eating food without getting fat, or having orgasms at the touch of a button. Why would they bother colonizing other worlds when they've already created heaven around their sun? And then again, here's the scariest theory when it comes to the possibility of aliens existing. What if they're not friendly? What if there's many advanced civilizations out there, but they know about one other scary civilization going around, hunting for any civilization that they can find? If you lived in a dark forest and knew there was a predator that would hunt you down if you made even a squeak, then you try your damn hardest to stay silent for as long as possible. This is the dark forest hypothesis, that other civilizations know better than to broadcast their location, in fear of alerting the hunter civilization to where they are. Stephen Hawking, one of the greatest minds of the century, warned about this exact possibility. He argued that there has rarely been a time when two civilizations met in the history of Earth where the less advanced civilization wasn't exploited, enslaved, or destroyed. Take the deadly Columbian Exchange, where European conquistadors and settlers wiped out various civilizations in North and South America, either from greed and warfare, or from diseases that they brought over. It's highly likely that if an advanced alien civilization were to visit us, it wouldn't go well for us, so might as well stay quiet. On a similar vein to the Dark Forest, maybe there is a great filter, but the filter is another civilization. What if there is a Type 3 civilization that has conquered the galaxy, and they're monitoring all the planets for intelligent life? What if, when they detect a certain species getting a bit too clever and trying to reach for the stars, they come and wipe them out to nip them in the bud? They might be afraid that any new civilization could oust them as the master of the galaxy, so they're keeping life in check. Which begs the question, should we be searching for aliens in the first place? What if, like in the book The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence is the cause of our own downfall? This is where the Fermi Paradox becomes most interesting. It makes us sit down and ponder some really deep questions like, how special and rare are we? Are we of any significance in the grand scheme of things? Should we dare to try and make contact with aliens that might want to kill all of us so they can turn Earth into a kick-ass summer retreat with a water slide? For me personally, I find the Fermi Paradox fascinating because it highlights just how little we know about the universe. We squabble over such small, insignificant things at times, like which way toilet roll should be hung, whether the dress is white or black, or how we should be living our lives. But the Fermi Paradox reminds us that we're a literal drop in the ocean, and possibly a pretty impermanent one as well. It could be that we're just years or decades away from meeting the Great Filter and being wiped out, like hundreds of other civilizations around the galaxy. That might induce doom and gloom and anxiety in many people, but I like to see it from another angle. It's a reminder that there's so much outside of our control, and trying to control everything, particularly our fates, is a foolish endeavor. The past few years certainly have shown us how unpredictable life can be, with the world throwing up barriers that we couldn't have even foreseen, like toilet roll shortages. So instead of fretting over things we can't control, maybe we should take solace in the fact that we're alive and that we exist, because it's entirely possible that we're the only ones in the entire universe to owe displeasure. To quote the great philosophers Calvin and Hobbes again, if people sat outside and looked at the stars each night, I'll bet they'd live a lot differently, Calvin said. How so? Hobbes asked. Calvin replied, well, when you look into infinity, you realize that there are more important things than what people do all day. On that delightful note, let's call it an episode. So, what did we learn today? We learned that there are trillions and trillions of planets in the universe, with possibly up to 1 million planets in the Milky Way alone, that might be similar enough to Earth to host life. We learned that if intelligent life has developed anywhere else in the universe, there's a good chance that they've had millions and billions of years to explore the entire galaxy and make contact with us already. We learned that even though we're looking pretty hard, we haven't seen any aliens yet. And this is very strange because the map says there should be aliens. We learned that we might be alone in this universe, because there might be great filters in the universe that stop intelligent life from advancing enough to travel the galaxy. We learned that aliens might exist, but we might not be seeing them because they're too different from us, they think we're too basic, or they don't want to travel outside of their system. We learned that the universe might be like a dark forest with a big scary predator, hunting advanced civilizations. So it's best for aliens, and us, to stay quiet in case we get found and destroyed. Lastly, we learned that we're nothing but a speck of dust, a tiny drop in the ocean that is the vast, vast universe. So nothing we do really matters, and we might as well make the most of this short life we have and just enjoy it. Alright, for today's 2-minute explain, let's talk about paper. More specifically, how many times do you think you can fold a piece of paper in half? You might think it's super easy. All you need is a massive sheet of thin paper, and you'd be able to fold it like at least 100 times, right? Well, turns out you're wrong. I can bet you that you won't be able to fold a piece of paper more than 7 times. Go on, try it. The reason is because, as with all the cool things in life, maths. A standard printer paper is less than 0.1 millimeters thick. If you fold it in half, the thickness doubles, so it would be 0.2 millimeters thick. If you fold it a second time, the thickness doubles again, so you have 0.4 millimeters. Do you see the problem? It's our old friend exponential growth from episode 4. Every time you fold a piece of paper, the thickness will increase exponentially, which, as we know, is super powerful. By the time you folded a piece of paper 7 times, the thickness will be 2 to the power of 7, or 128 times thicker than when we started, or 1.28 centimeters. At this thickness, the paper will also be tiny in area, because it's 1/128th of the original A4 size. Even if you started with a huge piece of paper, the distortion from the folds will be too great for you to apply enough leverage to fold the paper. So does that mean it's literally impossible to fold a piece of paper more than 7 times? Well, here's where math saves the day again. Back in 2002, a high school student named Brittany Gallivan figured out using maths that the solution is not to fold a piece of paper in half the normal way, as in folding in half every other direction along the middle of the longest side each time. Instead, she realized that you need an extra long piece of paper and just keep folding along the same axis over and over. This resulted in the least volume of paper per fold. What's the kind of paper that's super long that we just have around the house? Oh, that's right, toilet paper. But Gallivan didn't use any old toilet roll. She needed an extra long toilet roll because she knew that it would be 256 or even 512 times smaller than the original length due to the exponential growth problem. So she managed to get a toilet roll that was 1,200 meters in length, that's right, over a kilometer, and successfully folded it 12 times. And that, my friends, is what Finn the Human would call mathematical. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Explain This. I hope you've learned something interesting and maybe even useful today. Hope you all had a lovely Christmas and a Happy New Year. If you're thinking about making a New Year's resolution, how about going back and listening to episode 9 and learning about yearly themes instead? I've settled on 2023's yearly theme being the Year of Cultivation for me, after a successful year of creativity for 2022. Feel free to comment on what your yearly theme is for the new year, and may you achieve all the things you want to achieve this year. We'll see you next time. Bye for now. Explain This was written and hosted by me, Jin Kim. If you'd like to suggest a topic or just send a lovely message, you can email me at explainthiscast@gmail.com or follow me on Facebook or Twitter